Are we ready? Yeah? We good? Okay. Good morning, everyone. Welcome. It's great to be here in Nairobi on this Friday morning. Thank you all for coming on time. And so we'll start, and we've got many other colleagues that are going to join us during the day. This is a Umoja Academy overview session for managers. My name is Uren Pillay. I work with the Umoja team in New York. My role on the team is Project Management Officer. So I lead the Project Management Office in terms of its budget, administration, project management, contract management, and all those interesting things that nobody wants to do for the project. I'm joined here today with my colleague Marcus Schiff. Marcus, you want to...
Yeah, good morning, everyone. My name is Marcus Schiff. I work in the front office of the Umoja Project Director. I take care of what we call the Umoja Academy, and today is part of this Umoja Academy program. We will talk about this in more detail when we go through the slides today. Before joining Yen, I worked 11 years with SAP. SAP is the software company that has built the software that we use now in Umoja. And we will touch on experiences on how to implement the software and the implications of this kind of a project on an organization as we go through the day.
Okay, so while Marcus will go into later on about the Umoja Academy, I think it's important for us to set expectations for what you're going to go through today. So we have in the Umoja Academy 3 sessions that we run. One is the A1 session for USGs and ASGs. And the first part of this presentation, almost up to about lunchtime, you're going to hear exactly what our ASG has presented to your ASGs and USGs. So it's virtually the same presentation. In the afternoon, we go through functional areas. So the A2, the difference between the A1 and the A2 is that we add the functional areas to the A2. So what that gives you is a broad overview of the solution. So this is not really a training. You're not going to learn how to use the system. You're not going to see Umoja. We'll have a few demos. We can demo a few things. But what you're going to understand is what the solution contains, what functionality it has in it, how this functionality will impact you, what are the major changes, so that you can start to decide whether you want to go to a further training in a particular area that has an impact for your team or the work that you do, and get more information and dive deeper into actual training on Umoja. The A3 level is for line managers, and this session also has it includes chiefs, unit chiefs, section chiefs at that level. Here as well, we have the same session as the A2, but we also have a 1 to 2 day further training on a deep dive in a session in a particular functional area that you want to go deeper into. So as you go through this high level, there's some things that you're going to find are closer to you and more relevant to your work, and others that are not so relevant to your work. But in the end, you will get a broad overview end to end of what Umoja is, so that you can make a decision about what you want to go and do further.
The other one, I think.
Okay, so while we're waiting for the sound to come, I'm just going to raise my voice a little bit. just want to get a sense in the room of who's had.
We just had a quick overview in our division on travel, HR issues, consultancies, and such issues.
Which division is this?
Division of Environmental Law and Conventions.
There's a webcast on.
And then we'll dive deep into functional areas. So each of the functional areas will get about a 10 to 15 minute overview, just giving you what the differences are between how we currently work and how we are going to work in the future. You'll find that there'll be some repetitive themes. Transparency, access to information, efficiency, effectiveness. You're going to hear those themes constantly. Don't get irritated by it. It's just meant to show you in every module how this transparency and access to information and global system comes out. While we deal with the system in functional areas, it is not compartmentalized in that way in its operation. We just deal with it in functional areas because that's the easiest way to communicate it. But it's a fully integrated system, and you'll see how that operates. Any questions so far? Okay, good. So, like I said, the first part is the same session that we had for senior leaders, USGs and ASGs, so we left that as it was. Now, you may have some feelings about how our current systems operate, and a reason why the genesis or why the impact or the reason for coming out with a new system came into being was driven out of these issues or these pain points, as we call them. You may have some personal views on this and agree with this. We have just a lack of information. So getting information was difficult. Just putting together a report took days. Access to information was a problem. Heavy bureaucratic processes, layer upon layer of approval. Over time, we've built other systems. We've built parallel systems, we've built paper-based systems, some people built some of them electronically, but all of these things just added layer upon layer of bureaucracy to the system. Within it, we didn't have controls that were automated. So the controls were either, if they were operating, they were not automated, they were manual. So the efficiency of those controls were not operating in the way we'd like them to operate. IMIS and other systems are aging. So, and this links to the last point about IPSAS compliance. You had to make a decision about, do you customize IMIS to become IPSAS compliant, or do you go out and look for a solution that's going to be inherently IPSAS compliant and take you forward? Duplication of efforts, I mean, you probably identify well with this. You have separate systems that you enter some information in, and then it goes into IMIS, and somebody else has to enter the same information in again. So there's a lot of duplication, a lot of unnecessary work being done. Throughout the Secretariat, we have 8 disparate, non-connected IMIS databases, and that's not talking about all the other applications that hang off this. So we were not acting as one, even with this system called IMIS. If you go to New York, you find they do some processes differently from the way it's done in Nairobi. They do it differently in Vienna. They do it differently in Geneva. So the harmonization across the Secretariat was not there in the way we act. So we're not acting as one. And IPSAS compliance was also a further major driver that we needed to make some changes to the system. So those were some of the issues that arose and the pain points that we experienced that led to us deciding we've got to put a business case together for a change. But this change, this Umoja that we talk about, is not just an upgrade or replacement for IMIS. It is not just like a upgrade to Microsoft Word that you're putting in, or an upgrade to Windows operating system. It is fundamentally a business transformation. It's fundamentally a change in the way we work. And you as managers need to take advantage of those changes. And we'll show you what the change impacts are and how you need to take advantage of those changes. We'll speak about a very important area called business intelligence. And business intelligence is where you get all the information and run your dashboards and reports. And this is a very powerful tool for you as managers. So in designing Umoja, there are a couple of really fundamental principles that we adhered to. And the first one was integration. So we needed, in order to mitigate those pain points, those issues that you saw, we needed to have a system that had processes that could operate as one single integrated system. So you could do end-to-end, you could increase collaboration across the organization and have one system and not many. So totally integrated, also integrating finance with your other operations, with procurement, with your fixed asset system. So just integrating the total process, the total system. We had to be also cost effective. We had to find ways to reduce the duplication, reduce the waste, reduce the layers so that we can make more effective processes in supporting our mandate. So moving towards more mandate delivery and making our processes much, much more effective. Also, location independence was an issue. So we had 8 different databases, and if you were in Nairobi, you had to transact in the IMIS database here in Nairobi. If you were in Bangkok, you needed to transact in that database in Bangkok. We needed a system that you could transact from anywhere in the world in one global application. So you needed to be location independent. So with Umoja, you will see that that design principle holds true. In the way we designed the processes and the way we designed the roles, there's open access to information. So with a few exceptions like personnel data, bank records, banking information for vendors, everything else, if you have the role, you have the access to see any information across the whole secretariat. So you don't only see information in Nairobi, you see information across the secretariat in a particular area that you want to look at. So information sharing and transparency is a core principle. Automating the controls was also really important. Instead of having pieces of paper going around and having people sign off on pieces of paper, this needed to be automated, and you'll hear about a concept called workflow, where the system will automate the flow of a document from the initiator to the approver, built in, automatically, understanding what the delegations of authority are, understanding who the next level of supervision is that needs to be signing off something. With Umoja, being one system, being one application that's run throughout the Secretariat, you have harmonization of the way we do something. So exactly the way you do a process in Nairobi is exactly the way you would do it in Vienna, Geneva, New York, Bangkok, Santiago, anywhere. It's the same process. So we're going to standardize and harmonize the process across the organization. This has major advantages for staff, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. Service orientation, linking to cost effectiveness, was very important. It's trying to move the back office function to be absolutely efficient, effective in supporting the delivery of mandates. So mandate delivery needs to be the focus. This is why we are all here, and our back office functions, our administrative support functions need to be supporting the program managers and you as substantive chiefs and unit chiefs support you in the delivery of your mandate. In general, the Umoja principle needed to provide a better staff experience. So staff that were involved in administrative functions that involved typing in information, then retyping it into another system. We needed to unpack those layers and give staff the opportunity to be trained and developed in areas that allows them to do analysis and run data analytics and take the information and make better use of it and assist you as managers in making better decisions, in planning better. So there's a much richer staff experience in this whole deployment. So those were the design principles. What's in the actual box in Umoja? So you'll see we talk about source to acquire. Source to acquire, fancy name for requisitioning to purchase order. So sourcing the goods to acquiring it. But that links in. So you enter data in once, it links to logistics execution, which is the module that covers the receiving of goods. So what you requisition and purchase order, you actually receive. That links to, if it's a fixed asset, it links to the fixed assets and facilities module. So all of these modules, although they sit in this box, they're all interrelated, they're all interconnected. And the message here is you enter information once and you use it throughout the life of that system. You don't have to constantly re-enter information that's in the system already. We will cover that in much more detail. In Umoja, we will have about 10,000 transactional users. So people that will be running day-to-day transactions and processing transactions to support you as managers. So they will be doing actual transactions. We will also have another group of people, we estimate in the region of about 500, will be business intelligence power users. So all this information in this box that we're talking about, once the whole world in the global secretariat is entering information into the system, these business intelligence power users are those people available to you who are going to help extract information, take different views, slice and dice information on different statistics that you want, different reports that you want run, to be able to make better decisions and help you in running your teams. So we have business intelligence power users who are going to be in the system. Another important element of Umoja is whether you transact in IMIS today and whether you are going to be a transactional processor or a business intelligence power user or not, you will interact and you will operate in IMIS, in Umoja. You will. Because they have an employee self-service and a manager self-service function where you as an employee, as a staff member, me, your directors, every one of them will have to update their own information in employee self-service. So you have to enter if you are to change your bank account, you will go and change your bank account details for yourself. If you want to apply for an entitlement, you will apply for that entitlement yourself. If you want to update your dependents, you will have to do that for yourself. So all this information is entered in employee self-service. Manager self-service, and we'll cover this later on as well, is if you as a manager have a team, if somebody in your team goes into employee self-service, applies for a day of annual leave, that will get routed through to you as a manager, and you will approve the leave in the system using manager self-service. So you could see how this is changing the culture in the organization and changing the way we work just by having this self-service function. I know in some cases you have already applications that you use in the system that are built around IMIS where you do some of these self-service functions, but understand this is integrated into the system. You don't have to re-enter any information at any point. You have direct access to it. Some of the management and organizational paradigms that are changing, and this is just reinforcing what I've said before, is I really want you to grasp this. We have an enterprise solution. So starting with the enterprise perspective, this is an enterprise solution, meaning that everywhere throughout the Secretariat, you're going to be using and have views on the same data. So you as a staff member, if you are entered into the system and you're recorded in the system, you are available as an employee record throughout Umoja. So if you transfer from one location to another, there's no sending scripts 3 months later so that you can be taken on into another database of IMIS. Once you are in the system, you are always in the system. So the same applies for vendors, for partners, for donors, for banks. So you have a global enterprise solution where information is entered in once and viewed and used throughout the Secretariat. You have information availability. So like I said earlier, you have a single version of the truth. So if I run a report here in Nairobi and I run the same report in New York, I get the same information because it's using the same data. It also introduces the opportunity for doing really, really cool data analytics and benchmarks, and it changes some of the staff roles in taking the executive offices that we have in New York and the FIOS team we have in New York and getting them to work in different ways in this data analytics and making maximum use of information availability. Self-service I introduced as a major culture change about making significant changes in the way personal information is entered, so it's on a self-service basis. Being geographically unlocked is being location independent, is being able to perform transactions from anywhere in the world. So this provides different opportunities in the sense that you could decide how you want to transact, where you want to do transactions. Do you want to ultimately work in service centers? So it provides different options for the way services are delivered. Segregation of duties is a real paradigm shift in the sense that when you have small offices, and this applies to maybe country offices away from headquarters where you have small staff contingents and they're not able to maintain segregation of duties because they have very limited number of staff. And by segregation of duties, I'm talking about the controls that are fundamental in the system, that, let's say, a person who enters vendor information is not allowed to pay a vendor because there's an inherent conflict, and it's good business practice not to have the one person do both functions. But sometimes in small offices, they had no choice because you can't go and employ another person just because you have to maintain segregation of duties. What the system does for you is allow you options in maintaining these segregation of duties, because you can have somebody doing an approval somewhere else. You don't have to have them in the same location. So you have the ability to maintain segregation of duties within the application. You also have roles within the application that are fundamentally designed in a way that will not allow one person to have two roles that are conflicting. So the access you get to the system, let's say I get the access to enter vendors. When somebody wants to give me access to pay vendors as well, automatically the system will say, sorry, you can't do that because this conflicts with other roles. So you've got to make a decision about which role you give a person. So this is done in the system. A major paradigm shift, the big paradigm shift, is the appointment or the designation of process owners. Process owners are those individuals designated by the Secretary General. There's the ASG for Human Resources, the ASG for Finance, the Controller, the ASG for Events Management, the ASG, he's not an ASG, the Controller, for Logistics, the Director for Logistics, and the ASG for OCSS, Central Support Services, covering travel, procurement, and facilities management. These process owners have a very particular role in Umoja, in driving the change, in establishing the policy, in approving the design, in improving any enhancements to the system, and their role in comparison with the role of heads of departments who have the authority, the mandate to deliver on their substantive areas is an interesting change, and we'll talk a little bit about that, I think, in the next slides to come. This slide talks about just recapping the transformation and the changes to the way we work. So more focus on mandate delivery, more focus on transparency on information, more focus on harmonizing business processes, more automated delegations of authority and pushing the empowerment down to where it belongs. Changes to staff roles in a positive way. Standardized real-time common source of information compared to what we had in the past. And through this whole process, through bringing Umoja in all duty stations across the world, we had to standardize and make the infrastructure, the IT infrastructure, common to be able to support a system that we're going to rely on 24/7. So we have a data center in Brindisi, a data center in Valencia, and there's redundancy across the system. There's special software to make sure that we are protected from an IT security perspective. And if there's any problems in the system, anything happens to one database, we seamlessly cut over to the other database with about a 15-minute lag, and you are away and operating. So these controls, this infrastructure is much more strengthened now, rather than having a fragmented system or infrastructure that we have in our current landscape. So, if there are any questions, please, we'll take them. Yeah, please.
Yeah, thanks for the intro. I'm Mick Wilson. I'm with UNEP. On the business intelligence power users, I'm wondering, is provision being made for capturing the competence and capability that they bring to bear on dealing with any one particular analytical requirement, in order that that expertise then be available to other, essentially non-power users, in preserving the knowledge and capability?
It's fundamentally a business role, so the person needs to understand the business well. But yes, it develops. We'll cover that later on. You'll see in BI. So let me not jump to that, if you don't mind. Yeah. Yes. Please.
Thank you. Now, just a quick one. I see in the number 2, the eight element that you have presented, that somewhere the second one, I think, or the efficiency, there's a way of avoiding duplication. So I'm assuming that my colleague in other division is working on the governance in St. Lucia on a project, for example, and I wanted to do the same, maybe to do something like that in that country. So it means that the system will alert me that this is happening here or something like that.
No, but it will not alert you that somebody else is doing, but you'll have access to view who's doing something in that area. So you can see who's doing a project. So when we talk about grants later on, how grants are managed, you have access to see what projects are being run in this location in the world. And you can see, okay, so these are the various projects that are being done, and how does that compare with the project that I'm running, and how do I leverage the information that's there already. You can make decisions around that. But if you have to still enter a project in, it's not going to say, no, you can't do that. It doesn't have that sort of intelligence built into it. But we'll cover that under grants. Okay. So Umoja is not just a new system. It's changing the way we work. So it's basically taking the imagine the as-is solution as a square. It's taking a round disk and trying to fit into it. Now, change is always difficult. Change comes with fear, with concern, with anxiety. So this session is meant to give you an introduction into what those changes are going to be, so that you feel better about what is coming down the line. It's not going to be easy. Any change is not easy. This is also, if any of you have been around when IMIS was implemented, I wasn't, but if you were around when IMIS was implemented, it was painful. So imagine that sort of pain. You also have the pain of changing the way you work now to how the system works. So Umoja is not about taking you, Nairobi, or any of the other locations down to how you work currently. So it's not implementing a replacement for the as-is. It's lifting everyone up to the way Umoja works. So it's changing the processes. It's fundamentally changing the processes. So if we had to make a change for you, Nairobi, because you are unique in this way, that change has to apply throughout the world, because everyone's operating in the same process. So there's very little localization of the solution. The General Assembly were very, very adamant when they approved the business case for Umoja, saying this system should not be customized. So you should, as far as possible, use the system as it is. Remember, SAP is the underlying software that we use. This is used in over 150,000 organizations, public and private sector throughout the world. Over the years, they have managed to build best practice into the system. So inherently in the system has the best practice in it. So this is the best way in how processes work, the most efficient way on how to process something. We need to lift ourselves up to that bar. So fundamentally, it's transforming the organization and taking us from where we are to how the system operates. So how we've come along in Umoja. So this is just familiarity with terms that you've heard and may have heard. You've heard terms Umoja Foundation, UF. Umoja Foundation. That's just the fundamental piece of functionality that we implemented in peacekeeping missions and special political missions for IPSAS compliance. So we needed to be IPSAS compliant as quickly as possible. So we carved out those finance and procurement pieces of the solution, called that the Umoja Foundation, and implemented it in peacekeeping operations and in special political missions. That's been in operation, and that's about 60% of the organization. If you take the staff and the budget, so 60% of the United Nations Secretariat is already working in Umoja, and they've been working in Umoja for the last year. Now, it hasn't been an easy exercise. It's taken some time to stabilize, but there were valuable lessons learned. And throughout this presentation today, we'll talk about some of the lessons learned and how we're going to mitigate, or how we are or have mitigated those risks as we go forward. The next tranche of functionality incorporated human resources administration and travel. That we refer to as the Umoja Extension 1, UE1 solution. That package of information, functionality was implemented in our peacekeeping mission in Haiti in July last year. Is piloted there. And it's operating, it's integrated with the Umoja Foundation, so that's been operating fairly well. What you will get on the 1st of June 2015, so in 3.5 months' time, will be a Umoja integration, which is the Integrated Solution Foundation and UE1. So you will get both of these packages of functionality. So you will get all the finance, all the procurement, all the human resources administration, and the travel processes. So in cluster, we'll call it Cluster 3. This is UNEP, Habitat, UNON, ESCAP, and OCHA. So this is Cluster 3, and they will get both the integrated Umoja Foundation and Extension 1. In November 2015, the rest of the Secretariat, New York headquarters, Geneva, Vienna, all the remaining regional commissions will be deployed. Both, again, the Umoja Extension and Umoja Foundation. Umoja Extension 2 comprises functionality around budget formulation, demand planning. These are additional functionality that we didn't include in this tranche. That will be released as UE2. The design is ongoing as we speak now. We'll build next year in 2017, and deployment will start in 2017. And this, up to the design of UE2, is managed by the Umoja team. So as we are now, this is the Umoja team, a separate project team responsible for this all the way up to the build of UE2. But moving on from there and starting in 2017 will be a what we call a mainstreaming function, activities. We will start to transition from being the Umoja team into specific areas in OICT and in other parts of the organization. Transition and the Umoja team will cease to exist, and OICT will take care of the further deployments and releases in 2018, 2019, and so forth as the system progresses. So the process owners will make decisions about functionality that they want to add, different design changes that they want to make, and the OICT organization will take over the implementation of it. Towards the end of this, or the end of this presentation, we'll give you the specific links to all the information, including this presentation, where you can go and get it and look at review the details of this presentation. We'll also give you the links to the Umoja Academy, where there's a whole bunch of information, detailed trainings and stuff. Whatever you are interested in, you can go and have a look at. So at the end, we'll share that with you. I spoke about process owners and the paradigm shift on how we're going to make, we shift responsibility to process owners. So the Secretary General appointed them in January of 2013. These process owners are part of the Umoja Steering Committee, and they have very key responsibilities to define the processes, to accept the design, to build the policies that will support the processes, to mobilize process expert resources in order to support questions that come from the various locations on how to deal with specific issues that you may have. And most importantly, to sign off on the benefits realization. Umoja is supposed to realize benefits. These benefits are a negotiation between the process owners for their particular area and the heads of department, and we'll talk a little bit about benefits realization as in the next couple of slides. The Chief Information Technology Officer is also a member of the steering committee and a process owner, and she's responsible for the IT infrastructure, making sure that the IT infrastructure always supports Umoja and its availability. But she's also responsible for working with our project director to facilitate the mainstreaming of Umoja into OICT. Talking a little more about the role of the process owner and versus the role of the heads of departments. Now, if you can imagine these silos or these separate pillars representing substantive departments, and these all have a USG, a head of office, and these heads are responsible for two pieces currently. They're responsible for their core mandate and delivering their core mandate that the General Assembly has given them, and they're also responsible for managing the support, administrative support functions that help them deliver these mandates. So some of the back office functions that facilitate the delivery of their mandates. Under Umoja, there's what we call a tight-loose model. The heads of departments have a very flexible control over mandate delivery. So they decide how they want to deliver their mandates, or what decisions they want to make around that, how they plan it, how they structure themselves, what processes they engage in, how they report. So they have flexibility over their core mandate activities. What process owners do is have very tight control over how the administrative processes work. Human resources, finance, support services, including procurement, logistics. So the process owner drives the consistent, harmonized, efficient process across the organization. So they are responsible for that. So the interaction between the USGs and the process owners is almost like in a matrix organization. These processes are harmonized across the organization, and this is really where the Umoja footprint is. This is where Umoja works, and this is the service delivery model that has been established in this relationship between process owners and USGs as heads of departments. Any questions? Okay. So talking a little bit more about changing work patterns in administrative areas, what you're going to find is over time, so Umoja takes about 1 year to be stabilized, and then after that you're going to start to see some real tangible benefits and major changes. You're going to see less clerical type work. You're going to see less people managing time and attendance. In New York, we have people in the office that just manage time and attendance. So you have, the figure was mentioned yesterday, of around 70 people whose responsibility, and I don't know whether it's their full-time responsibility, but 70 people have responsibility for managing time and attendance to make sure that everyone is checked into the office, and if you had annual leave, that you submitted your annual leave form. If you're on sick leave, you submitted your sick leave form. So they're managing all of that. Imagine this is all going to be on automated in the Umoja time and attendance module. So time management is going to take care of that. So you're going to find less of that type of work, less of layers of signing off approvals, moving around pieces of paper in order to get approvals. Less approvals where they are needed and only where they are essential, not just for the sake of signing a piece of paper. So you're going to have much less of that where the system starts to manage some of these processes. At the same time, you're going to have much more of other things. You're going to have introduction of new roles. You're going to have the ability of staff to start to work in advisory capacities, using the information for decision making, using the business intelligence capabilities to do data mining and data analysis, run reports, do benchmarking. You're going to have the ability to use information to run reports that will help you in planning future events. So you use historical data to make some decisions about how you're going to move forward, what was your performance in the past, and how you want to change that or how you want to duplicate that for performance in the future. You can set some benchmarks around how you are managing your resources and measure that over time. So there's lots of things that are going to increase and be enabled by this access to information. The implications for staff are very important. You're going to have the elimination of unnecessary work. So stuff that definitely work's going to change, particularly in the back office and administrative side, where somebody used to do something, they're not going to be doing that anymore. So we'll go through that in the change impacts. But what you're going to get is the opportunity to do something else. You're going to get the opportunity to focus on more strategic work. So training, retraining, repurposing people from doing clerical, mundane typing, retyping work into doing more data analytics and training them to do different things. The opportunity to improve their own skill set. Just by virtue of the fact that we're going to be moving to Umoja SAP. SAP, like I said, was used in 150,000 organizations throughout the world. So it's really a respected best practice. Just by virtue of the fact that staff are going to be trained in SAP, using SAP, lifts them and builds better skill sets within staff members. New jobs will be created, new types of roles that didn't exist We'll talk about other roles like asset accountant and travel and shipment approver. But there's also roles for process experts, local process experts, and BI power users. These do not exist right now. Imagine the Umoja team I spoke about was going to go away. You're going to have a support mechanism that will help you deal with really technical issues. But your first line support in Nairobi are local process experts, people who are excellent transaction processes right now. We'll talk a little bit about what a local process expert actually does, but there's a role for that individual. There's a role for somebody to become a process expert, to help facilitate and help train new users and facilitate the movement of production support issues right here locally, rather than send something back to New York when it's just a how-to question. You're going to have training, the availability of training, both end-user training. Nairobi in itself will be a training hub to provide ongoing training for users within Umoja, so new staff coming in or any particular area that staff need to be retrained. So for the Africa Secretariat, Nairobi will be an ideal hub. So training takes place more not by entity, it takes place geographically. So you could have different organizations coming here to be trained. So this will provide a lot of support for staff. Mobility is enhanced because you're working in a harmonized system. So if you are moving from doing a job in Nairobi and you're going to want to transfer to another location to do the same job, you know how the system works. They operate, everyone in the Secretariat operates on the same processes, so mobility is really supported and facilitated through Umoja. Addressing redundancies through attrition to mitigate impact. So over time, stabilization over time, you're going to find you yourself as managers making decisions around, hey, okay, so somebody is retiring or they're leaving the organization. Do I still need that person, the new person coming in, to do just that role, or can I get them to do something different, business intelligence power user, or get them to do some more substantive type work? So you're going to manage and have the ability to decide how you want to structure your organization over time as attrition takes place. You're going to have the ability to take advantage of a smooth ramp-up process. So when we go live on 1 June, we're not just going to say, okay, so we've done the user training, everything's good, we switch you on and off you go and leave you. No, that's not how it will operate. There'll be a very organized ramp-up process, so staff members who are trained already in the system to operate Umoja get taken through a very methodical, organized ramp-up, so that it's a controlled environment. You get to process transactions on a particular day, and we get feedback, and the next day we add more to it. Your local process experts that we would have all trained already will be very much sitting, looking over their shoulder, making sure that users are supported all through the process. Just jumping again to what are the non-staff related benefits of Umoja is really visibility. So this concept is really important, is the visibility to information across the organization. For example, you are able to see inventories anywhere. So if you're looking for, if you work for an emergency response office, and that's your responsibility, and there's some emergency that you need to respond to, you're looking for diesel generators, and you need them very quickly, you're able to go into the system and see where all the diesel generators are in the entire Secretariat. You will see that information, be it peacekeeping, non-peacekeeping, OCHA, anywhere, Habitat, anywhere. You can see where all the diesel generators are and start making some calls and saying, hey, can we leverage some of that inventory that you have? It allows better stewardship of assets, so you may be able to manage your assets better. So IPSAS is really supported and facilitated by the system. You're able to make information-based decisions. So you're able to support your decision-making through the information that you're extracting from the system. You're able to do benchmarking. You can understand how does OCHA manage the grants? How does OCHA manage their contributions and their projects? Let me see how this project works so that I can take advantage of that. Let me see how I can benchmark myself. Somebody does a process within a certain period or a certain time. How can I set some performance targets to manage my processes in that way? And having more effective controls that are built into the system is also a key benefit that we'll talk about increasingly later. Benefits realization. What I want to say here is that what we've done already is projected to the General Assembly an estimate that Umoja, with all its good things, are going to be delivered and derive benefits to the value of $140 to $220 million starting in 2019, and successive benefits after that. The Secretary General's committed to that. The member states have committed funds based on that. And now the process underway is for this benefits realization to be refined. The process owner, each process owner, those process owners I showed you earlier, each of those process owners now go through the process of saying, okay, so how and where are these benefits to be derived? what is the UNON portion of these benefits, and then come to the DG UNON and say, look, I think we need to talk about how these benefits are going to work and where we're going to derive them from. So between the process owner and the head of the department and office, a discussion will take place around how the benefits are going to be realized and what those benefit targets are. So this will be underway for the next year or so. In the 2016-2017 budget exercise was managed on a slightly different track, where the benefit was mainly derived out of peacekeeping, because they have now been over 1 year into operation. They've stabilized, and now we can start to look at 2016 and 2017 and see what benefits peacekeeping can be, what benefits they can realize out of their budget. So this is how the process is going to work for benefits. When? Marcus will take you through some of the deployments, so give you an understanding of what's coming down the line, and then from there we'll go quickly into who's going to be doing this and the role of process experts and experts, and then we'll have a break and jump into functional areas shortly after that. Yeah? You want to talk about?
Oh, there's a question. One question, yeah.
Sorry, two questions. One, the implications for staff. I'm sure that for those performing clerical duties now, there will be less of those, and and move towards maybe more strategic work. But isn't it partly the result of self-service? So aren't some of these clerical jobs more moved on to the managers and other staff? And the other question is, you gave an overview of the benefits in particular. What do you see as the major drawback of Umoja?
Yeah. So let me see if I heard your question correctly. It's the staff implications and the result of employee self-service and the reduction of work that staff who currently do this clerical work, what impact it will have on them and how this impact is going to be mitigated.
No, actually, isn't part of the clerical stuff transferred through the self-service enhancement? So some of the duties that are no longer done by clerical staff are now done by other staff themselves.
Yeah, that's true. So if you had, let's take HR, where you had an HR officer sitting and entering a rental subsidy into IMIS, that person is not going to be doing that anymore, because that rental subsidy is going to be taken over by ESS. So the person, me, the staff member, if I wanted to apply for a rental subsidy, I apply for it directly in the system, and there's no need for an HR person to be doing that. But there are other roles that the HR person are going to be doing. Because you have this self-certification and you have most of the staff, all of the staff entering their own information in, there are periodic random audits of the accuracy of the system. So I go in, I enter my rental subsidy, I enter all the amounts, I have all the documentation with me, and I certify this is correct, and it goes directly to payroll and I get paid. So nobody looks at it. But there's a random verification of this. So HR work will be more on post controls, looking at every couple of random number generated applications for rental subsidy. They'll retrieve that and say, okay, let me just check, let me call on you to say, can you provide your documentation, because I need to check this. HR work would also move into doing more support for staff development and those type of work. So the movement is from staff entering your rental subsidy into the system after you've completed a form requesting the rental subsidy, entering that into IMIS so that you can get payrolled, you doing that work, they're not doing it, but they're doing other work. So does that answer your question somewhat?
Yes, it does. I'm just curious to know how much the workload has been added to other staff taking over these processes through self-services in your trials.
It's an interesting question, and Marcus is, based on his experience as an SAP user for over 11 years, will add to this as well. Look, you do rental subsidy maybe once a year. You do dependency, change to dependency whenever you have an addition to your family or one of your children is now out of the dependency allowance. So this is not things that you do every day. So it's not going to add that overall burden to your day-to-day activities. It's once you get used to it, you'll find it's, minutes rather than hours, days, or weeks that it's going to add. But I'll let you tell them about your own experience.
Yeah, I can just share my experience from having been a self-service user for 11 years. And so I think the first thing that we need to emphasize, even today, for instance, we talk about rental subsidy, you often have to complete it on a paper-based form and hand it somewhere in, and you need to bring it there or send it or a pouch. So in that sense, you already have an effort today, and this effort now is just in a different way that you do it online. But as Jürgen just said, most of those activities are only done not on a very regular basis. For instance, if you take leave requests, it's only perhaps every 2-3 months that you enter a leave request, and we have a system demo later on that shows you how to enter a leave request. So this does not even take 1 minute. So I think, although from my experience, I would say overall it didn't take me more than 1% of my total capacity that I had to spend on administration of my personal data. So because most of those things, first of all, pretty easy and quick, and second of all, they don't happen on a daily basis. So, and even if you have a manager role where you, for instance, have to approve leave requests, perhaps if you have a team of 10, then you may have one leave request every week or so where you just click on accept or reject. So, and you have these processes, although today, but most of the time it's often a paper-based process, or it depends a bit on the location, how it's been implemented. But I would say overall it's not an add-on to to what you have to do. It's just a different way how to perform this activity. It's online. It provides you also far more transparency because you exactly know what the status is and what you've entered in the system. So in that sense, overall, I wouldn't be scared that we now move this effort to someone else and that we now put a big burden to every one of us. So from my experience and from thousands of other employees that I know working in this kind of employee self-service, you get used to it, and then it's just business as usual, like reading an email. So, yes, please.
Yeah, thank you. My question is just to understand the difference between the process owners and the heads of department. And what are these processes is owned by these process owners. And the heads of department actually are also responsible for all the programs and also the procurement, human resources for efficient and effective delivery. So what is the major distinct between these process owners and heads of department? Thank you.
Would you like to cover it?
So when I showed the this diagram, so the message I was trying to convey here is the process owner is responsible for making sure that the policies and the way you operate the process, the way you operate human resources processes, finance processes, procurement the process of how it moves through the system. Just the process. So it doesn't interfere with the delegations of authority that these people, that the heads have. It says Procurement will be dealt with in this way. You will have a requisition, you will have a approver for that, you will have a buyer, it will be routed in this way. Low value procurement will be handled in this way. HR processes will be handled in this way. And nobody has the ability to change that for their own particular operations. This is the standard way in which we operate throughout the organization, throughout the secretariat. While the substantive head of department has flexibility on how they want to structure and deal with their office on substantive and programmatic issues. So that's the fundamental distinction. It doesn't take away their authority, their delegation of authority, any of that. They still have what they have. It's the process, the step-by-step process of how something is dealt with in Umoja. That's where the process owner has the right to determine how processes are being managed, just so that we have harmonization throughout the secretariat and no entity, location, unit is doing something different to the way it's done somewhere else. That's
means that these process owners dealt with support services.
yes.
Yeah.
Only with support services.
Okay, thanks.
Only with support services.
Okay, any further questions? Oh, there was one more question, yeah?
So regarding the ability to, I know you said that nobody wants us to touch Umoja and change it. I don't know how plastic it is. But with IMIS, we've had the ability to put applications in there. For example, one of the things I do is to measure the air travel emissions from UNEP. So is there a way in which Umoja can be program may be too much, to have it deliver data to databases and for us to automate that, because one of the things that's happening to us is we're going to lose automation, it looks like, when we go to Umoja. And then the database to have the program and then feed into another database and then perhaps feed it back into Umoja.
Yes, so the good thing technically, this is definitely possible. So you can build interfaces to any other system. Although when we talk later on about business intelligence, the business intelligence system is not limited to your Umoja data. So potentially you can also include any further data sources into the business intelligence. So you can have a read access to your Umoja data or extract data, but you can also import data. So the only thing what needs to be done, these kind of interfaces needs to be specified and then need to be built on both parts of the interface. But yeah, we already building interfaces, and we will talk about interfaces, for instance, later on about interfaces to Inspira, to UNDP, and so on. So there are already interfaces being built to other systems as well, and theoretically you can build an interface to any further system or extract data from your Umoja and import data. Okay, before going ahead, I just would like to make a short announcement. So we have these sign-in sheets, and I will just pass them on here. There is one for the colleagues from UNEP and one for the colleagues from UN Habitat. So we now covered the why, so why we are doing Umoja. We also had a quick look on the what, so what Umoja is all about. But as said, we will go into far more details than later on when we go through the function areas like human resources, procurement, and so on. We also briefly covered the how and how the approach is in order to implement the solution. We have now two more areas that we would like to cover before we do those function area overviews. The first thing is the when, so we would like to introduce when is Umoja coming and what is the scope and which activities are required now before go live and after go live. This is very important for you to know because it will have a severe impact on how good and how smooth those transactions will work as soon as we go live. And in addition, we will have a section which is called Who, and the Who basically will then talk about who is involved and what roles do we have in the system, and we will also particularly emphasize training, so what kind of training opportunities do we have, so this might be interesting for yourself, but also for your staff, so that you have a good overview, what are the future roles and which training opportunities do we offer in order to support you to build the required knowledge for those roles. In terms of the when, this is the overall project plan. You don't need to read the very details. What is important to know, there are two colors on this chart. On the left-hand side, you can see blue boxes. On the right-hand side, green boxes. The blue boxes stand for those deployments that we've already accomplished. Deployment basically means we take the software and we go live and we start processing in a certain area. So Eurin already referred to it. We have implemented the foundation functionality in peacekeeping and in special political missions, and we've had a first pilot for the additional functionality being called Extension 1, and that comprises travel, human resources, and payroll. So this has already been piloted. The first green box that you can see here, this is on the 1st of June, and this is the green box that you are being part of. And this will be for the first time the joint deployment of the Umoja Foundation functionality and the Umoja extension functionality. There's a question here. Yeah, so I said I will talk you through, unfortunately, this room, we had to change the room, so I know it's difficult to read. You will get access to all the materials, but we will try to cover the content so that you don't have to read it. So this first green box, which is supposed to happen on the 1st of June, so only in 3.5 months, this is being called Cluster 3. Part of Cluster 3 is UNON, UNEP, UN Habitat, OCHA, and ESCAP. After Cluster 3, we have a further deployment being called Cluster 4, and this is planned to go live on the 1st of November, and this will be the remaining parts of the UN Secretariat. So it will be UNHQ in New York, it will be the Geneva and Vienna-based entities, it will be further regional commissions. So what you can see by that is that Cluster 4 is comparably even bigger than Cluster 3. Why is this important to know? Because there is a strong dependency, although across those different cluster deployments. The reason for that is that we already had the first deployments in the past, for instance in peacekeeping and special political missions, and the key lessons learned from those deployments was that we had, when we went live in those missions, we had a lot of efforts had to be spent in order to support those users after the day of go live. The result of that was that we had to postpone the deployment of Cluster 3 and Cluster 4 by roughly 1 year. So by the time now you should already be live in the system, but we had to spend so much effort on supporting Cluster 1 and Cluster 2 after their go live that we were not able to proceed with the deployment according to plan. So in that sense, our main goal is to try to jointly with you to do a better job this time when we do the deployment in Cluster 3 in order to also make sure that we can deploy Cluster 4 on the 1st of November. And this is also very important because there is a commitment from the Secretary General, and it has been reinforced so that we finish the deployment of Cluster 4 by end of this year. So if Cluster 4 is scheduled for the 1st of November, there is not much time for postponement anymore. So in that sense, we need to go ahead, and we need to make sure that Cluster 3, as soon as you go live, to the extent possible, that we prepare you in a way so that you can at least try to be as self-sufficient as possible so that we can continue with Cluster 4, which is even, as said, even a broader scale and of entities that we need to deploy. So therefore, there is a lot of deployments are happening this year. So you can see there is a lot of efforts that need to be spent in order to make this happen. There's one more deployment that I also just would like to share with you. It's being called Cluster 5. This is the remaining Extension 1 functionality for the peacekeeping and special political missions. As said, we haven't deployed travel, human resources, and payroll for them so far. So this remaining piece of functionality will be deployed in Cluster 5 on the 1st of March in 2015. Also referring to what Yurin already explained earlier, so this will not be the end of the journey, but the journey will continue. So now the 1st of June is just the first big step also for you, but also just to be prepared, there will be future regular further releases. So we plan to have those releases on an annual basis. And this is important for you to know because you will see as soon as you go live with the system, the typical feedback we get as soon as you are live, you will have additional requirements. You will see, this is possible. Why can't we also do this and that? So you will have further requirements. We just had an example. Can we also build this interface to that system? Things like that. So there, I think, there are a lot of opportunities as soon as you are live in the system. So we also then are looking for your input to see which additional requirements you have in order to further support your business. And then this additional requirements will be included into future releases, and you can then expect further releases on an annual basis. The next chart that we have for you is we will now further zoom in order to see what is happening before and after go live for you on the 1st of June. Again, the only thing that you will need to see here on that slide is there are 3 different phases. The first one is this blue phase, and this is the phase until the day of go live, and this is being called realization phase. The next phase is then a red phase, which we call the ramp-up phase. So this is roughly the first 3 months after go-live. This is like a hypercare period where we try to support you as much as possible in a way to first start those transactions in the system in order to ensure that they run as smoothly as possible. So this is usually a special setup so that we do not just say now we are live and you go ahead, but we try to have a proper setup in order to support you in the first steps in that new way of working. And then by roughly September 2015, we go to the third phase, and this is then called the steady state. So hopefully we will then transition into a more stable operation, which will then be the standard operations after some time. There is one thing that needs to be really emphasized on this slide, and this is one of the key takeaways of this session today. There is something which is called a blackout period. And the blackout period is this gray shaded area before the 1st of June. Blackout period means that you will neither have access to today's systems nor to the Umoja system. It basically is a period of 2 weeks where it will be very difficult to process any transactions, and this applies to all functionalities. So it's very difficult to procure a good in this time frame, to travel, to process personal actions and human resources. So whatever it is in this period of time, our strong recommendation is to try to avoid transactions as much as possible in these 2 last weeks of May. Yeah. There is a question over there.
Thanks. I just want to clarify. We've been told repeatedly that the blackout was mid-June to mid-July, and now I'm hearing it's something entirely different.
So I'm not sure where this information is coming from, but the go-live is the 1st of June, and the blackout is always the 2 weeks before the go-live, because we usually, this is the main reason for this blackout period is we are doing a data conversion from the old system to the new system. So from the 1st June onwards, you will have the new system, so there is no need for a blackout anymore. So we only have this blackout when we need to cut the old system, extract the data, validate that the data is correct, and go to the new system. So therefore, the only point in time when this is required and when it makes sense is the 2 weeks before go-live, and the go-live date is the 1st of June. So if you have any other information, the blackout period is the last 2 weeks in May. Okay, in addition to the blackout period, we have several activities that need to be accomplished in order to go live, and these are the round boxes that you can see on the bottom of the page. The first activity that you can see here is called manager class. So, for instance, the session today, the goal is to transfer this knowledge, what Umoja is about, to you as managers. And again, this is all based on lessons learned that we had from Cluster 1 and Cluster 2. In peacekeeping, we didn't have this formal program in the past, and then a lessons learned was that we trained the end users, and they were supposed to do new things in the system, but their managers didn't know. And then we had the effect that the system was, in some cases, not properly adopted. So adoption basically in our words mean that you now follow the new processes or the new way of working according to the Umoja system. What happened in peacekeeping is that they still applied their old processes, and on top they applied the new Umoja processes. And this is for sure not the way that we would like the Umoja solution to be introduced. We have this example that we often cite in this case is they had a travel process, and they had 8 signatures in the past, and then they added the Umoja solution. The Umoja solution, there's a rule to limit the number of certifications up to 3 signatures, and then they just added those 3 signatures. So instead of replacing and reducing them from 8 to 3, they ended up having 11 signatures. And this is for sure not the goal of the Umoja project, and therefore we need your support also, so that we really follow this new way of working. And as we go through the day, you will see there are a lot of changes in a lot of function areas, but we need your support also then to make this possible, that we say this is the new way of working, and we get rid of today's processes. So this is the main purpose of sessions like today. In addition, we have testing activities. Testing, basically, the goal is to ensure that the system works as designed. We currently are in a phase that is called product integration testing. So far, we have tested the different functional modules and themselves. So, for instance, we tested the human resource module, the travel module, and so on. And now we do the integration testing, because as I said, all the modules are in one system. So therefore, the functional modules have an impact on each other. For instance, if you create a travel request, this has financial implications and so on. So therefore, we are currently in the final stage of doing this integration testing. In addition, there is one last testing cycle starting soon and being hopefully finished by end of March, and this is then being called user verification testing. User verification testing is the last kind of proof of concept from a user perspective, so where the users need to sign off and agree, okay, the solution works, and we are ready to go live with this solution. In addition to testing, we have an activity which is called data conversion. This may sound rather technical, but this is very important, although very important for every one of you to know what data conversion means, because it can have an impact on all of you. So data conversion basically means in the new Umoja system, we, in order to support all those processes that we have in scope, we need to have certain data in order to process those transactions. The key challenge right now is how to get all this data that we require in the new system. Some of the data already exists in legacy systems, for instance in IMS, and we can just do it with an automatic transport. In other areas, unfortunately, it's not that simple. For instance, we have areas where we need to collect data for the first time, because this data has never been collected in a standardized way so far in the organization. One example is real estate. So for the first time, we have collected all the real estate data of the Secretariat. So we now know how many buildings and floors and rooms and things like that we have. So this has been all collected. Another area where we had to collect information for the first time is fixed assets. So these are assets with a high value. So we are now in the process of collecting those assets. And a third area is organizational structure. And this is one that is very relevant to each of you as a manager. So for the first time, we will introduce an organizational structure to this central system. Organizational structure means nothing else than just defining who reports to whom. So we know this may exist in some departments today in a very different format. Now we will put it in a very standardized way into this system. And this data has a lot of implications later on how the transactions will flow in the system. For instance, when we will talk about leave requests, the leave request will always be routed to your manager. So therefore, it's very important to define who your manager is and who reports to you. So we need to be sure that this data is properly captured. And as I said, this will be collected for the first time in a standardized way. In addition, in terms of data conversion, in some areas we do already have legacy data, but this data is not rich enough. Or we need to cleanse this data because we have conflicting data entries. To give you an example for this, if you have served in different duty stations, you most likely will have different employee records because we have different systems today. So in one system you may have a different name, or you may be married or not, or you may have more children, and so on. So you can imagine if we now pull together all this data to one central database, we need to make sure that we only have the most recent and most correct entry of all of us, because it has an impact on payroll and so on. So you can imagine there is a lot of work that needs to be done, because the problem is in today's IMS systems we have a lot of old records that are not up to date, and we do not know which data record is the most current one. So you can see there is a lot of data challenges that need to be properly addressed in order to go live. Another area, and this is as of today the most challenging area, is grants. So grants is this is the terminology that we use for contributions, and we will in the future manage those contributions in the system. The challenge is that we need far more data on those contributions in the system than we have today. So there is a lot of data cleansing, data enrichment required in order to make sure that we have all the proper data for all those contributions in the new system. And this is currently being worked on by several people, perhaps also in your teams, to support this initiative. And this is kind of the key challenge that we still have before we can go live, because so far we have thousands of those contributions and even more data elements being associated to each of those contributions. So there is so much to do still, and we only have 3 months left to complete all these data exercises. What the approach for this data conversion is, we do it in iterations in order to test how good this works. So those data iterations are being called mocks. And in those mocks, so first we take 20% of the data and we see if it works, and we increase the footprint. And then by the time we go live, we do this final data conversion. And this is then this final time of the blackout period. So hopefully by the time we do this final data transformation, we have all the data in place in order to be sure that we have a proper data structure for the day of go live. Again, another example from lessons learned. So what happens if we don't have the right data in the system? And unfortunately, we had a lot of those cases in the past. Then you will have a severe impact not only on administrative things, but also on mandate delivery. For instance, in peacekeeping, we had examples that an airplane could not start anymore because we couldn't buy the fuel. And the reason why we couldn't buy the fuel was that the vendor providing this fuel was not recorded in the system. Yeah, they forgot to add this vendor. So the same applies to you if you have a vendor and you would like to buy something on the 1st of June, and this vendor is not being migrated now to the new system or not being added manually, you will not be in a position to purchase something from this vendor. For sure there is a process, you can add a vendor, but this then may take a few days. So if something is mission critical, you better plan in advance and make sure that all the data is correct in the first place. But as said, these are thousands or hundreds of thousands of data elements, so this is really a big challenge. And I would say that the majority of issues that we had in peacekeeping after the deployment were related to data, that the data was either not correct or data was missing, and so on. So in that sense, it's in all our interest to spend all required resources to make sure and verify that all data objects that you require in your daily work after go live are included in the new system. Any questions on data conversion?
Excuse me. I have a question related to the blackout period, the 2-week blackout period. What is the business rationale for a 2-week blackout period? Is it best practice? And then all the risk related to this blackout period, operational risk, were they identified and mitigation analyzed?
So the last part?
All the risk related to the blackout period, have they been analyzed and identified? Like the risk of issuing no payment for 2 weeks, if there is any humanitarian crisis, and so on, so on.
Yeah. So let me start with the second part of the question. So there is what we call a blackout form in this blackout period. So there is an exception emergency process. It's a paper-based process, and we will need to re-enter all those transactions then in the new system. So, but yes, you can still, if there is a crisis, an earthquake, whatever, there will be still a possibility to perform transactions, but it's paper-based. In that sense, it's not very fast and efficient. But yes, there is a way, and I also understand that here. So we ask all the entities like UNON, UNEP, UN Habitat, also to develop a business readiness plan, and also to make sure that there is a plan how to mitigate the risks for this time period. So I think there is a way to still perform transactions, but I would say for everything that you can plan ahead already, then to the extent possible you should avoid it. Now, again, coming more to the details why we need those 2 weeks. So the 2 weeks are 10 business days. The main reason is it refers to the data conversion that we just discussed. It first takes a few days to pull out all the data from the legacy. So you need to stop transactions you need to say this is the state that we will use for the transformation. So we will stop transacting in all the systems, and then it takes a little bit to extract all this data because it's a huge data volume that you need to extract from the system. The second step that we will then do is we run data validation. So we need to make sure that all the data is correct, that it's consistent, and we will have people for each data element from each entity that need to sign off and say this is correct. Yeah, they compare the IMS data and the new data, the new system, and say, okay, this looks right, so we can go ahead. Yeah, this financial accounting data, this is the last version. I agree. So we need to sign off all these things. So therefore, although everyone who is involved into data collection, data validation, these people need to be here for those 2 weeks, because if there's an issue, we need to add a data element here or there. This needs to be done in those 2 weeks. And from our lessons learned from peacekeeping, it basically takes those 2 weeks to really have a final data validation and be sure, okay, this is a good state to go ahead in the new system. Yeah, for sure you could perhaps reduce it by a few days if our data mocks results would have been better, but so far we still have a lot of issues, so the data is still not perfect. I said in the grants area there is still a lot of things to do. So as long as we don't have a perfect state of data and we know it's correct in the potential source, we just need to be very careful in those data validations during the blackout period.
Payroll will be run in May?
The
payroll deposit will be run in May? On time?
In early May then, yeah. Okay. Yes, please.
Yes, thank you. This is maybe preempting this afternoon's discussion, but will Inspira and Umoja exist in parallel? And if so, what's the data migration between Inspira and Umoja?
Yeah, so I said we will cover it. Just to give a quick heads up on this topic. So Inspira will further exist. The Umoja will not replace this system. There will be interfaces being built. So there will be certain data will be transferred from Umoja to Inspira and the other way around. So we will talk about those details this afternoon. We have a detailed slide on this. But for the time being, so there is Umoja will not replace the system. So Inspira will still be used for recruitment. Okay, the next activity that is currently happening, this is called user access mapping, and this is in addition to data conversion, this is the second very, very important activity. In the new system, you can perform transactions, and a transaction, for instance, is creating a leave request, creating a purchase order, and so on and so forth. For every of those transactions, they can only be performed by predefined users. So the transactions are mapped to user roles. So now the basic question is who gets which user role, and because only if you have a certain user role, you can perform a certain transaction in the system. So in simple words, the user access mapping will determine what you are able to do in this new way of working. In terms of this user access mapping, we need to differentiate two types of users. One is what we call transactional users, and the others are employee self-service users. So every one of us will be an employee self-service user, and there is no additional mapping required. This is a standard default set of functionalities, and everyone will get this user role. When it comes to transactional users, those transactional users need to be mapped. So we have 106 different transactional user roles in the system. And for instance, one role is a requisitioner, so a requisitioner can requisition something in the catalog. Another user role is an asset accountant, so an asset accountant can depreciate assets, things like that. So there are 106 of those different roles. And the process of user access mapping maps individuals of the organization to those user access roles. Yeah. Again, going back to lessons learned from peacekeeping, what are the challenges in this user access mapping, and what can go wrong and what can go right? A problem in peacekeeping was that for some of the roles, they mapped far too many people, so we ended up having people then in the new system that were able to perform transactions even though that they didn't have the delegation of authority to perform those transactions. Yeah, so they were mapped to roles where they can approve purchase orders, but in today's life they shouldn't have this role. So in that sense, if you assign people to roles that they shouldn't have, you may have an issue. The same applies if you do not map users to certain roles, or not enough users to those roles, then you may create bottlenecks and a process cannot proceed, because a process assumes there is a next user in the process who will do the next step, and if there is no one mapped to this process, then this process flow is stuck. So you can see by mapping too many or the wrong people to those roles, or not enough people to those roles, it can have huge implications on the business processes, and they can also impact your mandate delivery. As, for instance, we talked about this example in peacekeeping earlier. So this user access mapping is really, really important to map the right people to those roles, also according to delegations of authority. And the main challenge of mapping those users is that we need to do this mapping based on the new Umoja way of working. So we will talk about all the function areas this afternoon, but you need to understand those before you can do a proper user access mapping, because it's not just enough to take everyone who performs a transaction today and map those people to the new world, because a lot of those profiles, the nature of roles will change. Jürgen gave this example of time management. This doesn't exist anymore in this role, so it doesn't make sense to map all these people to a role. The same is then in other areas. So you need to really understand what is to be the new way of working, and then only you can do a proper user access mapping. And if you don't do it properly, this was the other big area of issues that we had in peacekeeping, because we had so many wrong user access mappings. There's one more important thing to know about user access mapping. It builds the foundation for training. So based on the user access mapping, people will be trained. So we talked about those 106 different roles. So there is a training for all of those 106 different roles. And depending on the user role that you are mapped to or your staff is mapped to, they will be invited to training. Yeah. So therefore you can imagine if we map far too many people, and this was again the example in peacekeeping, we did a lot of training efforts. It was very difficult to train everyone because far too many people were mapped, and in the end they didn't perform this role in the system. So in that sense it was also a wrong investment to train that many people if they don't use the system in the end. So these are just examples showing you the importance of user access mapping. In terms of cluster 3, what we know, it's now this user access mapping is in a quite mature state already. So if you are interested in the user access mapping of your entity, please reach out to your local deployment teams. They should have these lists by now, who is mapped to which role. And as I said, based on this foundation, then in the next 3 months, all the end user training will be offered based on this mapping. There is one more thing which is called here workflow. So workflow is just, in addition to user access mapping, it helps to determine then always to define in a process who is the next user role to perform the next step in the system. So for instance, if we talk about a leave request, this is already pre-coded based on the organizational structure. So as the system knows who reports to whom, then the workflow is by default, the leave request goes to the manager. In other areas, you have more flexibility and you can define in a workflow who should be the recipient of this next process step. For instance, you can define it based on a threshold. If you would say you have delegation of authority up to $50,000, it should be user role A, and if not, it should be user role B. So you can define those things in the tables that are called workflow. Are there any questions on user access mapping and workflow? Yes.
Where do we find the description of all of these so that we can say what we want?
So the user access, we will show you links later on where you will find all the information, and for each of those 106 roles there is a detailed explanation what this role can do in the system and what it can't do. So yes, please.
Yeah, thank you. It's not about user access but technical access. Can you elaborate a bit on the minimum technical requirements to access the application, including for people not in Nairobi? We have in UNEP offices that are only 2 or 3 people. Thank you.
Yeah, so the question is about the technical or the connectivity to the system. It basically has 2 parts, this question. The first thing is you need to have an internet connection, and currently the CITO that Jeroen introduced earlier is driving a review in all duty stations that will go live in Umoja in order to test the bandwidth, in order to make sure that the internet connectivity part is sufficient in order to get access to Umoja. So this is the first part. The second part is there are all the requirements in terms of your hardware and software. So the approach for that, the main challenge today is that we have so many different hardware software configurations on all different computers in the UN Secretariat, so we do not have a common standard in terms of which browser we use and operating system. So therefore there is a tool being called, or a software being called Citrix. Citrix, it's kind of it standardizes the access layer, and those transactional users will get a Citrix user. So we have those licenses already for those users, and through using Citrix you become independent of your local configuration, of your hardware configuration, software configuration of your local computer, and by that it's being ensured that you can access the system. So in that sense it's the combination of both. One thing is the bandwidth connectivity of the internet, and the second thing is then we standardize the IT configuration by using Citrix. Yes.
In terms of the old data, for instance, let's say education grant data or travel claims and things like that of the past, Shall we expect that in now 6 months we start to receive requests that we have to justify because the system doesn't have this memory anymore, or is it having a memory to the past? Because this happened when UNON started to automatize some of the processes, then all of a sudden we receive a lot of requests because they didn't have the records to now justify participant DSA 5 years ago and things like that.
So the first answer to that is a lot of past data, particularly from IMIS, will all be converted to the Umoja system. But not for all areas. So it depends on the function area and also to which or how many years of past data will be transformed. The second step is then, so the system will not automatically trigger those reviews that you just indicated. So there is no plan to have those reviews being triggered by the system for those past transactions. However, I'm not sure what, based as we now then have this far more transparency in the future, it's then up to the different entities and see what they would like to do with this data and which checks they would like to perform. But this is, as said, not triggered by the system automatically, and I'm not sure then if someone would like to do this kind of analysis or these processes, but it's not defined by us so that we will trigger this. Yeah.
No, just to be clear, there is a delay between when we start an action, when it is actioned and when it is reflected in the financial system. So when it goes to the financial system, eventually from UNDP offices that send invoices and so on, there is a delay. How do we cover that delay in Umoja, for instance?
Okay. This now refers all the back to our blackout period. So we have provided guideline that even before we enter in this blackout period, we ask you in as many areas as possible to close all the open transactions. Because the more open transactions you have, the more of those challenges you will have that you just indicated. So in that sense, it helps to close travel requests and all these things already before we do the final cutover, because for every open transaction, we have to reconcile it as you just explained it. And so therefore, our guidance is to already start then kind of completing those processes to the extent possible by mid of May when we do the final cutover. Yeah. Yes, please.
I'm from UNODC. We're in Cluster 4. The most of our staff in the fields are recruited by UNDP, not UN Secretariat. You've mentioned that there is a link between UNDP and other, other UN agencies. These staff, our field staff, they have certifying officers, approving officers, authorizing officers role, as well as requisitioners, all that stuff. Will they still be able to perform these actions with regard to the access mapping, or we're in trouble?
Okay, so let's spend a few words on UNDP, because particularly field officers, UNDP is the key partner. So there are two answers to this. The first answer is you can also map UNDP personnel to those user roles. So if you would like to map someone from UNDP to a certain user role, be it requisition or so on, this is possible. So this is the first part. In addition, there's currently an interface being built. This interface basically between our Umoja system and the UNDP Atlas system. Both are enterprise resource planning systems, so they work in a similar logic. So therefore, it's quite manageable to build an interface between those two systems. And we have built now an interface on our side that, for instance, we can automatically process a financial authorization and hand it over to UNDP. So this can be triggered from Umoja. If you would like to give a financial authorization to UNDP, you can trigger this in the system, and this is being built. Unfortunately, so far UNDP, they have not yet developed their part of the interface. So when they get the financial authorization, they still need to manually type this into their system until they build an automatic upload of this authorization so that they can automatically process it in their system. So therefore this interface is still not being perfect, but at least on the Umoja side we can trigger this process and give the information, and we can also map UNDP users to the Umoja system. Yes, please.
Just maybe by curiosity, maybe you know the two systems, Atlas and Umoja. Is it a kind of very different item in it? Because when I'm listening, there are many functions you mentioned in Umoja, which I know that I have used them in Atlas. So is it really very close or similarity, or just wanted to hear your opinion?
Yeah. So the Atlas system is by a vendor being called Oracle, and basically there are only two big companies worldwide. It's SAP and Oracle, and they serve all big organizations in the world. So they have by far the largest footprint. And the Oracle software and the SAP software, they work in a very similar way. So the built-in logic about those user access mapping, about those predefined workflows, in many areas they are pretty similar. It doesn't apply to all areas. For sure there are some detailed functionalities that are implemented in a different way, but I think the overall logic is very similar. What is different is the user interface, so the screen looks different, but usually you enter the same kind of information to those fields. So if you know how to transact in Atlas, it shouldn't take you that much because you already know the logic behind. So, but still you need to get used to the new user interface and things like that. But I think the transformation is far easier if you have ever worked in an ERP than if you have worked with IMIS, which is a very different ball game. Yeah. Any further questions? Okay, if not, we are just one more comment and then we do a first break. So we will talk about training in the next section. This is very important, and we need to again differentiate between the training for employee self-services, which will be relevant to everyone, and all the managerial self-service, and for the training for those 106 user roles. And we will talk about both those things in the next section, because I think training is the most relevant activity now in the remaining weeks and months until we go live. Let's have a short...
Colleagues, I just want to remind you that this session is being webcast globally, so we'd like to keep time as tight as possible. So if we break now, it's 11 a.m. here in Nairobi. Let's get back together at 11:15 sharp, and then we can continue. Thank you very much.